I will share the recording with you all after. Thanks, Lorian. I hope it is an amazing session. I hope that it's useful to you. So we'll be basically having an overview of the IELTS test, the main information about it overall, and then we'll look a little bit closer at the 4 different sections. We'll do some practice in some of the sections, and then we'll also talk about if it's for you. So one of the reasons, well, I have very mixed feelings about the IELTS. I have a lot of experience with the IELTS. In 2014, I started working with the IELTS. I was an invigilator, so I gave the test to groups of students. It's not hard to be an invigilator. You have to speak English, and then anyone can be an invigilator. It doesn't pay very well. It's basically giving a test and making sure people don't cheat. But so I've seen the test conducted many times. After doing that for a couple of years, I became a marker. A marker is a person who corrects the speaking and, the reading and the listening sections of the test, because those are done on a piece of paper. They're not checked by a computer because people write in the answers, and also there's different possible answers. Some of the questions have only one answer, but some of them have more than one answer. And so they need a human being to check. So I did that for a while. So I know very well what kinds of mistakes people make in this section. And then finally, after that, I became a writing and speaking examiner. And that is a bit of a difficult process to become certified to do that. It takes time, and they're very strict. If you make too many mistakes as an examiner, then you have to recertify. And so I have direct experience with everything about the test except for the administration, like signing people up, sending results, things like that. But in terms of the actual test, I have a lot of experience with it. So I feel like I can share a lot of information. As I said, though, earlier, I have mixed feelings about the test. When I worked in the US, many of our students took the IELTS because if they passed the IELTS, they could leave our school and go on to university. And so they were really motivated to pass the test. And then in Uzbekistan, people have IELTS mania there. They are crazy for IELTS. IELTS is used for so many things. And so everyone, even people who don't speak English, are trying to take the IELTS. And I saw a lot of problems with that. I noticed that a lot of people weren't interested in learning English unless it was about IELTS. And that was really frustrating because IELTS is just a test. I think it's a very good test. I don't think that if you are not proficient in English, you cannot pass the IELTS test. But I saw a lot of people were only motivated for the test. And if I was teaching something, they might say, well, is this related to IELTS? And I might say, well, indirectly, no, I only want to study IELTS. So that was really frustrating. We'll talk more about that towards the end, because that attitude is actually not the best way to do well on IELTS, because it is a really high quality test, I believe. So to start us off, we'll have a little chat discussion. So I'm going to have you keep your answers in chat because of time, but I'm curious to know your background with the IELTS. Have any of you ever taken the IELTS? What do you know about it? What questions do you have? I probably won't answer all the questions now, but hopefully by the end of the session, I will have answered all the questions. So please share your background knowledge about the IELTS. If you have any experience with it, maybe you've taught it, maybe you've taken an IELTS class, maybe you've heard some rumors about it. So I'm curious to know, this group, what's your knowledge and your experience regarding the IELTS? Hi, Abdahat. Glad you are with us. The difference between IELTS and TOEFL. That's something I'll answer now. as the questions are coming in. They're both English proficiency tests. IELTS is created by the British Council, and it is used by British Commonwealth countries. The TOEFL is an American test. It's less common. I think more countries and more universities accept the IELTS. Many American universities accept IELTS. Not many countries outside of America accept TOEFL and TOEFL is purely academic. It's only for universities, whereas IELTS can be used for jobs and also for immigration purposes. And to be honest, I don't think the TOEFL is as good a test as the IELTS. It is, everything in it is integrated skills because it's making sure that students can use integrated skills for university, whereas IELTS does a better job of separating those skills. But both of them have listening, speaking, reading, and writing sections. Okay, VKI has not taken the IELTS. Good question, Lauren. Because it's such a well-regarded test, because it has such a great reputation, and because it's so common in other countries that many, not all, but many US universities and colleges accept it. Okay, so Anne, you've heard of it, but never thought you needed it, but you're here anyways to learn more. The SAT is for high school students. Sometimes foreign students need to take the SAT, but it's not that common. Usually they can take the IELTS or TOEFL instead. Almost every American high school student who wants to go to college or university takes the SAT. Almost none of them take the IELTS. A test, you don't need the IELTS to migrate to the US. You do need it if you want to migrate to Canada or the UK. America does not have a language test for immigration. It has one for citizenship, but it's not any of these standardized tests. We will talk about that, listen to. Hopefully by the end of this, you will have a very good idea of what it entails. So Margot, you've attended some of the sessions on these, especially on reading, and yes, scanning and skimming, close reading are all important skills for that. The difference in the bands, we'll look a little bit about that. Basically, it's the level of proficiency. Amali, I like your honesty. You have no background information. What is it in full? It's an English proficiency test, and we will look at its parts and you'll have a better idea. Oh, okay. What is OET, Patricia? You're an interlocutor for that, but not for this. Mr. Kabadi has not taken it. I'll show you, Khadijah, where you can look up where to take IELTS. I know it's administered in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu. Yes, Carolyn, very good. Yes, if you want to go to Australia also, you would need it. Okay, we have no one here who's taken it. We do have someone who is an interlocutor for another exam, Patricia. Okay. All right. And then the questions that are there, if I haven't answered them by the end of this session, we will come back to it. Americans, I mentioned almost no American high school student has taken the IELTS because the only reason we would take it is if we wanted to immigrate to Canada or Australia or the UK, then we would need to take it. Yes, Lauren, you could take it just to assess yourself. But if you're not rich, I don't recommend it. It's an expensive test. I'll talk about that too. So Americans don't often take this test. I will tell you though, when I was still an invigilator in 2016, means that I checked in all the people who came in. We did have a lot of Americans coming in 2016. And the reason is because Donald Trump had won the election and many people were leaving the country and moving to Canada. And so that is the only time, there was about 3 months, is the only time I've seen a number of Americans taking the IELTS test. All right, so this brings us to our first practice. If you were to go and take the IELTS test, most of it, well, we'll talk about, most of it happens in one day. And the first part of that day, yes, I will share that. Usually the first part of that day is the listening. In fact, that day, the first part is always the listening unless there's some kind of technological problem. So I'm going to give you an overview of the IELTS, but I'm going to do it in the style of the IELTS listening. I don't think so, Joseph. I think you have to, but I'm actually not sure. I think you have to if you want to work somewhere. I am not 100% sure about that. If you look in WhatsApp, you can see the document I sent, but I will also put it here. So I suggest that you get yourself a piece of paper and you mark your piece of paper 1 through 10 like this. That way you can write down your answers. So for example, you see on the test here, number 1, you'll write your answer here for number 1. For number 2, you'll write your answer here. You don't need to use your phone if you don't want to, but if it's easier for you to see the image I sent in WhatsApp, you can, but I'm actually going to show a larger image here. So I'll give you a moment to set yourself up to have a piece of paper that you mark 1 through 10. That will save you a lot of time because in this, you only hear it once. So you won't get to hear it again, and you're going to write your answers in as we go. I also just want to remind everyone to mute, just because the background noise can be interfering, especially if we're doing a listening task. Okay, hopefully you have your paper ready. And you can see here, I've just put the top part of the test because we're only going to look at one part at a time. That is how it's done in the IELTS. And now let me get my script. I've tried to make it as similar to the real script as possible. The real script is a recording. Every test center in the world on a given date is sent the same CD or audio. And so everyone in the world is listening to the same audio when the test is given. Of course, now I can't find what I'm looking for. Which is just an app on my phone that has disappeared. Okay. So for this, as I said, I'm going to say it once. Good question, Anne. Save that question. We'll talk about that at the end. So as you hear the audio, you will complete the blanks. As you write your answers, I wouldn't worry too much about spelling. You can always go back and fix it after. Oh, sorry, I'm having technical problems at this moment. Please bear with me. I had everything set up, or thought I did, and now technology is working against me. Okay, I think, okay, now we are ready. Thank you for bearing with me. All right, so Hello, welcome to the IELTS test. You will hear directions and then you will hear an audio. Please mark your answers on the test. The first one will be an example. Listen and complete the blanks with 3 words or less for questions 1 through 5. The first one will be done for you. The IELTS is an exam of English proficiency. The speaker said the IELTS is an exam of English proficiency, so the word proficiency has been written in the first blank. So you can see the example there, and now you will hear the rest of the test. Take this time to preview questions 1 through 5. Now, listen and complete the blanks with 3 words or less. The IELTS is an exam of English proficiency. It is taken by people all over the world for purposes of work, academics, and even citizenship. It was originally created and intended for those living and working in British Commonwealth countries, but we can now see it is being used in numerous other countries. The test is given in 4 sections. These are the listening, reading, writing, and speaking exams. The first 3 sections of the exam are taken consecutively on the same day and take about 3 hours total. The speaking exam may be administered within 2 weeks before or after the main part of the test. For all sections of the test, the highest possible score is a 9. The results of the exam give the score for each section and then an overall average. A score of 9 indicates native or native-like English proficiency. Many academic institutions require a score of 7 or more for admission, though it is possible to find institutions that accept a score as low as 5.5. Now, take a moment to look over your answers. Now, take this time to preview questions 6 through 10. Listen and complete the chart with no more than 1 word or number per blank. On the day of the exam, the listening test is given first. Test takers listen to 4 audio scripts and mark their answers on the test booklet. This takes about 30 minutes. Then an additional 10 minutes is given to transfer the answers from the test booklet to the answer sheet. The answers must be in pencil. Directly after the listening, the reading test begins. There are 3 long passages, and each is followed by a set of questions. Test takers can mark in the test booklet, but must use pencil to enter their answers on the answer sheet. No additional time is given for transferring answers. This section is 60 minutes. The exam day ends with the writing section. Test takers must write 2 essays in 1 hour. The first essay is based on a diagram or chart, and it is suggested that 20 minutes be spent on this essay. The second essay should take about 40 minutes and will entail a prompt that asks the writer to state an opinion and support it. The essays may be written in either pen or pencil. Most often, the speaking exam is scheduled for a day prior or after the main examination. It is a one-on-one situation in which the examiner will lead the test taker through a series of questions divided into 3 parts. Each section is progressively more complex and abstract in nature. The interview lasts between 12 and 15 minutes. Results will arrive in 2 weeks, either by post or email. The results can also be sent directly to academic institutions if requested. that is the end of the listening section. All right, so I'm going to give you a few minutes in the breakout rooms to share your answers. So you'll talk about what did you put for number one? What did you put for number two? If you and another person have different answers, it might be that one of you is right and one of you is wrong. It might be that both of you are wrong, but it is also possible that both of you are right. The IELTS allows for paraphrasing as long as it is accurate. If you have different answers, take a couple minutes and talk about it. See if you can figure out why your answer is your answer and why you think it's right. I'm just going to give a few minutes for this, but a chance for you all to talk and share your answers, and then we will go over the answers. So I have about 4 to 5 participants per room. I'm going to open the rooms so you can go ahead and push join. If you have any technical issues, I will be out here and I will share this also to the rooms. I'll see you in 5 minutes. I forgot to hit open rooms. Okay, now you should be able to join the rooms. All right, looks like we've got everybody back. Excellent. Okay, so first of all, if you didn't do well, I don't want you to feel sad. I mentioned earlier that Americans take this test. I will tell you that they don't do perfectly on it. It doesn't mean your skills are bad. This is your first time doing this. And there's a lot of stress with taking an exam, doing something like that. So if you didn't do as well as you like, don't worry about it. This is just for fun and for practice. Okay, so first, let me look at my example here. We can have either of these answers, I think, academic or education. This is a test used for professional, academic, or education purposes. So either answer is fine. For number two, we can have many, many other, various other. Any of those answers would be correct. Number three, the test happens on the same day or it happens on one day. That's fine. This is a good chance for me to remind you of the directions, that the answer can only have 3 words or numbers. So if you have more than 3 words in any of these blanks, or you have 3 words and a number, I will tell you that your answer will automatically be marked wrong. So that's something to pay attention to. Also, you are required to spell correctly, but British and American English are both acceptable. Number 4, the answer is 2. It will be scheduled 2 weeks before or after the main exam day. You can write the number or spell it. Although if you spelled it T-O or T-O-O, that would be wrong. Number 5, native speaker. So the person should speak like a native speaker. Number 6, this is 4 or 4, spelled or written. You must use pencil. If you wrote a pencil, this will be incorrect because questions 6 through 10 only allow for 1 word or 1 number. Number 8, if you put none, 0, or wrote the number 0, those are all fine. Number 9, we can accept essays or compositions. And finally, we have 15 minutes, either written out or spelled. Does anybody have an answer that they think is correct, but they're not sure and they want to check? Because there might be something I didn't think of, and perhaps it is correct.
Yes, Mina, for number 8,
Uh-huh.
yes, for number 8, I wrote no additional time.
But for number 8, you can only put in one word or number. And so,
Okay.
although the answer seems correct, it would automatically be marked wrong, unfortunately.
Okay. Then for number 2, I wrote numerous.
Yeah, I see. And also many people on the chat. Yes, I would think that would be fine. It makes grammatical sense, and it also follows what was said. That would be fine. Okay.
Thank you, Mwalimu.
Okay, number 1, work. No, because professional was already said, so professional and work would be the same. And so the second one needs to be about academic or education. So that would not work. Number 2, most. I think no, because most would mean more than 50%, and we don't know if it's most countries or not. We just know there are many. So I would say that they probably would not include that. I will tell you that the person who's correcting it is not making these judgments like I am. I created this, so I have to make the judgments myself. The marker has a list of possible answers, and they can only accept those answers. So you don't have to worry about that the person correcting is tired or something like that, or is cranky or mean. They have to follow what British Council has put out for them. All right, so hopefully that went well for you. It's kind of a sample of what the listening is like. So as mentioned in the task, the listening is the first test of the day. So when everybody comes in, everybody takes the listening test. And so the actual listening is 30 minutes, and there are 4 sections. And the first section is always like 2 people on the phone, and it's kind of like filling in notes, kind of like what we just did. The second one is a talk, and often involves a map or something like that that needs to be labeled and has some questions. The third one is a conversation, always between, it's always an academic conversation, either between 2 university students or a university student and their professor talking about an assignment or something. And then the last listening is always an academic lecture. So that was always the hardest one. Oh no. What happened to it, Emily? When more than one answer is accepted, can one be right and the other wrong? Well, you can only put one of those answers, and you can't put in multiple answers. So although multiple answers may be correct, you can only put one of them in. You can't try different answers, because whatever you put in has to make sense grammatically. So if you wrote, I don't know, for example, for number 1, I said educational and academic were both correct. You cannot put educational and academic for the answer. You can only choose one, but both answers are correct. So there are 40 total questions, and you mark directly on the test, so that the sheet with the blanks that I was showing you, you would fill directly on that piece of paper. And then after, you have 10 minutes to move those answers onto an answer sheet. And they only correct the answer sheet. As mentioned, it has to be in pencil. I don't know why. You only hear the audio one time. I once watched actually one of my own students just sit and listen the first time. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm just going to listen and I'll do it the second time." And I said, "There's no second time." She was very upset. Spelling is important, and also clear handwriting. If the marker cannot understand your handwriting, then they will just automatically mark you wrong. Punctuation is not important, so don't think about putting periods or commas. That's not important. Even apostrophes are not important. They don't care. And they don't care about capitals. So if you write, for example, Wednesday with a lowercase w, they don't care. There are multiple choice questions. And if you have those, you should just write the letter. You should not write out the whole answer to save you time. And also, if you make any mistakes with spelling and writing out the answer, it will be marked wrong. This is an example of what the second listening is often like, some kind of map or diagram or something like that that needs to be labeled. And then often there are questions like this as well that are multiple choice. And so you can just write A, B, C, or D for the answer. And I recommend doing that. Writing in the answer only leads to problems. So after the listening comes the reading. And this is also, this is a 1 hour test. And again, you have a booklet and you can write on the booklet, you can make notes, you can scribble, you can draw pictures, but you must put your answers onto the answer sheet before the end of the time. And unlike the listening, there's no extra time for this. If you are not finished, the examiner will just rip it out of your hands. So you want to be conscious of the time. The reading has 3 reading passages. They're all academic in nature, but you can do them in any order you like. Just make sure you put the answer with the right number. As mentioned, you can write on the question booklet. Again, spelling and clear handwriting are important. Punctuation and capitalization are not important. And something not mentioned earlier, there are also true, false, and not given. I don't think they have that in the listening, just the reading. And so you can write T, F, or NG for not given. Not given means that the answer is not there. We would have to guess the answer to know if it's true or not. But sometimes people want to be fancy and they want to write out true, they want to write out false, and they want to write out not given. If they misspell those things, it's actually okay. Oh, Margot, we'll miss you, but the recording will be available if you're interested. However, something that sometimes happens, instead of writing not given, some people write no given, and this is automatically marked wrong because we don't know if the answer is no or not given. And so it is IELTS policy to automatically mark something like that incorrect. So you're better off just writing T, F, or NG. And don't be like a tricky student and make a T that looks like an F. So you could say, oh, no, it's a T. Oh, no, it's an F. Something like that would automatically be marked wrong. So be careful with that. We're not going to do a reading practice because it takes time. Like I said, there's 60 minutes and 3 passages. So probably you'd spend about 20 minutes on each passage. But if you look online, there's tons and tons of examples of the reading tests. So the last test of the main day is the writing test, which is hard because at this point, people are very tired. You might be thinking also 3 hours, but what if I have to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water? You can go to the restroom, but you can only do it during the test time. So between the tests, you cannot go anywhere. When they're explaining directions, you cannot go anywhere. Only like during the reading or the writing, when the invigilator says, okay, your time begins now, then you can be like, oh, can I go to the bathroom? And then you can go. So they're very, very strict. The writing has 2 sections and you can do them in either order. You can write task 1 first or task 2 first. It doesn't matter. Some people prefer to write task 2 first because it's a longer essay and more thoughtful. And task 1 is tricky. Actually, many native speakers don't do well on task 1 just because it's very picky, even though it's short. Task 1, I'll show you an example in a minute, has a summary of a chart or graph or illustration, and basically you're just summing up the ideas. You shouldn't give your opinion about it. You shouldn't add any information. You're just describing the chart. What are the main features of it? And then task 2 is some sort of an opinion essay, and you should spend 40 minutes on that. I'll show you an example in a moment. You want to definitely read the question carefully for task 2. think so, Antonine, unless anyone else is having trouble hearing me. If they are, let me know, then I'll know it's on my end. Hopefully it will get better. If it is you, you might just try exiting and coming back in. It might just be a connection issue. Okay, the topics master can hear me, as can Mary. So yeah, Antonine, try maybe exiting and coming back in. Yeah, so go ahead, Antonine. Maybe you didn't mean to raise your hand. Task 2 is always an opinion question, but sometimes it says, I don't know, for example, some people like cats, some people like dogs. Give your opinion of the benefits of both and then discuss what you like better. Or it might just say, discuss what you like better. Whatever it is, make sure you read the question carefully and that you answer it. Oh, good. Thank you, Mitri. When they are assessing the writing, there are 4 categories they are looking at. They're looking at content. So are you fully answering the question? Organization. So is it coherent? Is there good cohesion? Is it organized with an introduction and other things? Although task 1, you don't have to worry about introduction and conclusion. But task 2, it should be like a standard essay. They are also looking at your grammar and your vocabulary. Vocabulary and spelling are put together. And punctuation, I think, is in with either grammar or vocabulary, basically mechanics. There are people who try to memorize an essay and then just change it slightly for the topic. IELTS knows about this. And if they think that it's just kind of memorized or copied, it'll be a low score. So this is an example of task 1 here. So we see a chart and there's a description here. The chart shows the number of men and women in further education or higher education in Britain during 3 periods and whether they are studying full-time or part-time. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and making comparisons where relevant. So we're going to go into breakout rooms and you have 2 questions here. You don't need to write an essay right now. But first of all, you and your breakout group are going to discuss what are the main features of this. So what are the important things on this graph that are worth talking about that should be included? And then this information, how will you organize it? There's different ways of organizing it. How would you organize it if you were writing this? So I'm going to give us about 5 minutes again for this. That way we have a chance to share answers after, and also we'll have time for the speaking section as well. All right, so we're going to go back into breakout rooms. I'm going to recreate them so that you get a chance to talk to different people. And we have more people than earlier. Okay. All right, I will open the rooms and I will share this so you can see that in your rooms. All right, I think everybody's back. All right, do I have any volunteers who want to talk about this graph, what the main features are, or how they would organize, or both? If so, you can hit the hand raising button and share, or of course, you can also use the chat. And I am going to mute all but if you would like to speak, okay. VKI, go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you think. Oh, your hand. Oh, go ahead.
There, the male in 1970 and the female in 1970, the male are higher in number, 1,000, and the women are about 800,000. And in 1990, 91, the men are about 900 and the female are 1,100. I think that's what I can pick up from it. And on the middle years, 1980, they're about the same numbers. And then the
Okay.
full-time education goes ascending for the male from 1970 to 1991. And for the female, the same, but there's a difference in the middle because there's a slightly higher jump than the male in the same year. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some good descriptors that would be very good, like a slightly higher jump, and nice job contrasting. Dr. Kabadi, I saw your hand up. Would you like to add to what we just heard?
I can't add much, but what I'm seeing in all bars from 1970 to 1990, we have the number of male and female increasing in number. That's all.
That's really good. I'm glad you pointed that out. So that would be marking those general trends, right? I think that, sorry, I can't remember the name of the person who spoke before, but she did a great job giving us the details. But we also want to identify those general trends and then support them with those details. Excellent. Does anyone want to talk about how they would organize this information? Because we know that an essay is not a list and we don't want to just list the information on the graph. We want to organize it into an essay. Does anybody have any suggestions about how we might organize it? I see hands up. Who are they? Justice, go ahead. Justice, you can unmute and tell us what you think.
Okay, what I think is that generally those who took part-time education were far much more than those who took the full-time education. Now, this is how I would organize the information. First, I would have to talk about the year, and then the number of men and women who actually took education, either full-time education or part-time education. I would just go year after a year.
Okay, so you go chronologically. Okay.
Yeah. So then after that, I would actually give my own personal comments.
Do not do that. Do not give your own personal comments in this section. People love to. They love to make guesses about why they think this is. This essay does not want that. It's very tempting, but save your personal ideas for the next essay. I'm glad you said that because it's an important thing. People lose points for adding in that stuff.
Okay. So that is basically what I would do. Year after a year, then I give the number of people who took the part-time education and the full-time education.
Excellent. Yeah, that seems like a logical way to do it, right? Going chronologically. Very good. Modesto, what are your ideas?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mina.
Hi.
Yeah, so what we will have done together with Isaac is to have an introductory sentence to maybe mention that the information is about Britain and those taking education both part-time and full-time. Then after that, we'll separate them into two. We'll separate we'll have a paragraph talking about full-time education where we'll be comparing the male and the female, and then the next paragraph, perhaps it might have part-time now, and a different one with full-time, then a different one with part-time. So I think that is how we will have organized hours.
Excellent. That seems
Thank you.
very logical. Thank you, Modesta. I'm also like what you said about how you would start. A 1 to 2 sentence summary of what is being shown in the graph is perfect for this. When we're teaching essays, we may teach like hook, thesis statement, all of that stuff. That is valuable stuff, and that would belong in the second essay. In this essay, we can keep it pretty basic. In fact, for this type of essay, we also don't need to waste our time with a conclusion. If you want to sum up with a general sentence, you can, but it's not necessary. So I like everything that I've heard from you all. I think there's basically 2 main ways to organize this. We can organize it by 1 paragraph talking about males, 1 paragraph talking about females, or we could organize it 1 paragraph talking about full-time education and 1 paragraph talking about part-time education. You could also organize it into 4, male full-time, female full-time, male part-time, female part-time, but it would probably be easier to do it with just 2. As I mentioned, you would want to identify general trends. So something that stuck out, I think, to many of you is that part-time education was far higher than full-time education. Another interesting trend is that full-time education, even though it was lower, was increasing in both groups. Another trend we see that with men, it's kind of a little up and down, and in the end, it's lower. But with women, we see a steady increase. So those are some trends. There isn't a limit, Kari, but you want to think about your time. It's suggested spending only 20 minutes on this. So of course, a longer answer is going to allow you to give more information, but you also want to think about the time limit. And it is possible to go into too much detail as well. So adding things that are not really important. In terms of the actual numbers, probably the highest numbers you would want to mention. So for example, if you were talking about women and how it was increasing, that maybe we might mention that there's a difference of, I don't know, what is this, about 800? There's about, what is this, 1,100, 1,200? I don't know, 300 or 400 more women participating in part-time education at the end of this than in down here. But you wouldn't want to just go through and say, okay, in 1970, this many men were doing this and this many men were doing this. In 1980, this many men were doing this and this many men were doing that. And you wouldn't want to just list. So you want to take that information and kind of identify the trends and then go into a few specifics that support it. As I mentioned, this is really hard for, oh good, Khadija, I'm glad I'm giving you the experience. I had a friend, she's German, she's excellent. She's an English teacher working with me. Her English was amazing. I feel like the entire time I knew her, I heard her make a mistake once. She used the wrong preposition for something. Her English was amazing. She could not get a 9 on this, and she could only get an 8.5 on it. And so she could not become an examiner. Some of you are asking about becoming examiners, and to become an examiner, you need to, if you're not a native speaker, born in the US or UK, which I know it seems really unfair, you might be a native speaker, but born in a different country. If they have any question about it, they will ask you to take the test, and you must get a 9 in all of the sections. And so she could not get a 9 in this. And so she was not able to become an examiner. Very frustrating for her because it's so picky. This, I think, is an easier one. This is task 2. And this is more of a standard essay with an introduction, body paragraphs, thesis statement, and you give your opinion. So this would be an example of the type of question you would see. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that you read the question and what they want you to do specifically. So here they just want to know, is it negative or positive? Sometimes they ask you to discuss both sides. Sometimes it's an issue and they ask you to suggest a solution. So you want to just make sure that you read the question carefully and specifically answer it. But this just follows basic essay structure. So this takes us to the speaking test. Most test centers do not give the test on the same day as the other exam because they just have too much going on. I worked at a test center that did it the same day, but that's unusual. So it can be anytime 2 weeks before the main test or 2 weeks after. And so you schedule it with them. Make sure to arrive on time because they have many people and they don't like to wait. So basically this takes about 15 minutes. It's the one that people get the most nervous for, but it goes very quickly. Oh, it depends, Kevin. It depends on what the question is. If the question asks you to state both sides, state both sides. If it just asks you what you think, that depends on what you think. If you think it's both good and bad, then you can answer that. So I would just read the question carefully. If it just asks for the good points, just say the good points. Again, it's the same. They used to count the words, they no longer do. They're more interested in, is it long enough to fully answer the question? And so that would come under the content part. And then same thing, if it was overly long, again, that would be with the content part. I would say you don't really have a word limit, you have a time limit. And you want to have enough words to fully answer the question. If you were to answer the essay with only 100 words, it just wouldn't be a very developed essay. And so you would lose points probably in the content section. I believe on the test, they have a suggestion for how many words, but nobody's counting that. So I don't like to think about it. I would see many people wasting their time in the middle of the test, counting their words. And they should instead be spending that time editing or further developing their answer instead of counting words. So when you come in for the speaking, they invite you into the room, they check your documents, and they do record you. And they record you only because if there's an issue later, they can listen to the recording. But usually nobody ever listens to that recording. You start out easy, talking about yourself and some general topics. Then part 2 is called the long turn. The long turn asks you to speak for 2 minutes on a given topic. And then they go back to that topic and start asking complicated, abstract questions about that topic. So we're going to do a practice with this. While you're doing it, the examiner is assessing your fluency. So are you stumbling over your words or can you speak freely and comfortably? How cohesive is your speaking? Do the things you're saying go together? Something, for example, that would often mess with cohesion, people confusing he and she. And so then as a listener, I'm confused. Are we talking about the same person or is this a different person? And that interferes with cohesion. And then grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. Fluency is with the cohesion. But grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation are all separate sections. If there's something the examiner asks you and you don't understand, you can ask the examiner to repeat or explain. Depending on what part of the test it is, the examiner can always repeat, the examiner can't always explain. I think section 2 and 3, the examiner can explain a little bit. In section 1, the examiner will just repeat. You may find if you take the test that the examiner cuts you off while you're speaking. The examiner just asks you another question. It's not about you, it's about the time. The examiner is under a very strict time table to make sure that you get through all the questions in the given time. When I did this, I found it so stressful because I would start to be listening to someone's answer and I'd think it was really interesting and then realize that the time was running out and then I would have to interrupt them and they would feel sad. It's very awkward. So don't take it personally if you get interrupted. Something that I think is interesting, many people, when they're practicing for this, they only think about academic vocabulary and academic language, but natural idiomatic language is actually also a sign of true proficiency. And so if no idiomatic or figurative language is used, it's actually impossible to score over a 6, because one of the descriptors for band 7 uses figurative and idiomatic language. So if you don't meet that threshold, you can't get higher than that. All right, so I'm going to ask you some questions for part 1 of the speaking test. Do I have a volunteer? Part 1 is very easy. If you would like to volunteer, please raise your hand and you will be my guinea pig. All of you are good speakers, so I feel like actually for you all this would be the easiest part of the test. Really, I have no volunteers? You're all very shy? It's not hard. This part, other parts are hard. Oh, I have, all right, VKI. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
The name is Vicky.
Oh, it's
I just
Vicky.
spell it like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Actually, so that would be, if you sat down in my special chair, I would check your passport and then I would confirm your name and I would say, oh, what would you like me to call you? And at that point you could say Vicky. That would be perfect. Okay, so are you ready, Vicky?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Vicky, do you live in a house or a flat?
I live in a house.
And what's your favorite room in that house?
I will say the kitchen because I love to cook. It's the place I find most joy in expressing myself.
Can you briefly describe your kitchen for me?
I'm an interior designer part-time, so I chose the color palette of black and white. Yeah. So most of the utensils are themed, they're white or in a bright color. I like pastels in a few items, but most of them are popping colors. So it's marble counters and the storage cabinets. And I like organization, so everything has its own compartment where I store them.
That sounds lovely. If you could improve one thing in your house, Vicky, what would it be?
The amount of money I have to spend in the house. I would love to have stuff that I am not able to afford.
Gotcha. So now we're going to talk about films. Do you enjoy watching films?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. And what kind of films do you like most?
I would say educational documentaries and the like.
And did you watch much TV as a child?
No, growing up, we had this time limit for children programming. TV actually in my days began at midday, and the generation right before me began at evening, 6 o'clock. So we had a 1 hour, 2 hour window to watch TV, and then we had to do homework, sleep, and then be ready for school the next morning.
I see. In your country, are foreign language films popular?
Not entirely, unless you go to seek out maybe something like French or German, or you're doing a different language. It's hard to find foreign language films.
Okay, thank you. All right, so normally there would be one more section. You did a great job, Vicky. Very natural speech, very fluent. And if you can make your examiner laugh, it's always a good sign, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline, I see that you have your hand up. I'm going to ask you the second batch. Is that okay? It's similar to what Vicky just did.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the first part is always about home or work. And since I asked Vicky about home, I will ask you about work. Hi, Caroline, do you work or are you a student?
I'm a student.
Oh, and what do you study?
Right now I'm studying professional and development for teacher trainers.
Oh, and why did you decide to study that?
Because I have this passion of putting myself out there to actually serve my community, and I would like to do something positive besides what I've done before. So I chose this one because it's something different, it's something new, and it's enlightening.
Ah. And do your fellow students also enjoy this subject?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. So we're going to talk about greeting people. How would you greet someone who is visiting your house?
Okay, first you open the door, of course, and then you either hug them if you're if you're open to each other, or you can greet them with your hand or just word of mouth, and you tell them welcome. Like,
Ah,
it's nice to see you. How have you been? It's been a long time, or it's been a while. Or if it's someone that you're really, like accustomed to, you can go deeper and in their greetings and everything.
that's interesting.
Yes.
How do you meet new people?
Of course, by some groups, like how I met the LPAC group. That's how you meet new people for me. Like maybe through a friend, can you introduce me to meet new people? Or if I go for an event, I will obviously meet new people. So it's the different ways that you can meet new people.
Very good. And do you think that first impressions are important?
Very.
Why?
Because that is what sticks in someone's mind. This person I met like 2 years ago. She looked a certain way. Okay, right now, 2 years later, she looks different, like maybe older or a little bit plumper, but and she talks less, like she unlike how she used to talk in 2 years ago. So first impressions really matter. That's how you actually remember, for remembrance sometimes, or to yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Great job. Excellent fluency, excellent use of natural language, pronunciation is clear. I would rate both Caroline and Vicky very high. I don't know the exact number. I don't have my thing here, but excellent. And obviously you both did a really good job, because after hearing you two speak, I see now I have a bunch of volunteers because you made it look easy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. I know others, we have more volunteers now, but we're going to move on because we only have a few more minutes, and I want to talk about the other two speaking parts. So the next speaking part makes people very nervous because you have to just talk for a long time, and you don't get to choose. So as you wrap up those general questions about film and greeting people, food, clothing, things like that, the examiner would say, okay, I'd like to move on now. I'd like to give you a topic to talk about. And then they pass you a paper and a pen, and they pass you this topic. And the topic is something like this: a holiday you recently had. Describe a holiday you recently had. And they usually have 4 questions there to prompt you about what kind of content to include in your answer. You are allowed to have 1 minute to prepare, and then the examiner will say, now you have 2 minutes to speak. I will tell you when it's time to finish. And then you start speaking until the examiner says, thank you. Because if you stop earlier, the examiner will prompt you to continue, and there's not necessarily a penalty, but it's better if you can just keep talking, because it is kind of a measure of your fluency. a couple tips here. If it is a topic that you don't know anything about, so for example, I don't know, I remember once there was a question about a boat trip or, oh no, being by the seashore. And some people I know have never been by the sea. And so they felt uncomfortable answering it. It's not so necessary that you talk directly on the topic. So you could say, well, you know, I really don't have any experience about the sea, but I'll tell you, I would love to go to this place. I've never been, but I imagine this, or a friend of mine went to the sea and this is what happened. So as long as you can give your answer somehow connected to the topic, then you don't need to worry. Teresa, I don't have a rubric. They don't let you take anything away. They don't let you take your phone into the room. They don't let you take anything out of the test center. But I believe if you look online that you'd be able to find, will you flip that light, Adam? Thank you. I believe that you would be able to find a marking rubric there that give the descriptors for each band. But I don't have one. So as you finish this, the examiner would ask you one more question, usually like, oh, and do you think you'll go back to that place? Which is a rounding off question. From there, that's when it gets more trickier. So the previous question was about a vacation. So now the examiner will say, we've been talking about a vacation you took, and now I'd like to ask you a few more questions related to this. And so then they'll start to ask, they actually have 3 sets of questions. They have easier, middle, and higher. So at this point, the examiner already has an idea about your abilities. And so they're going to decide if they want to ask you the 2 easier questions, or the 2 easier sets, or the 2 harder sets. And they're going to try to push you to your limit. And so if they push you to your limit, you find that suddenly your ability to speak falls apart. Don't be sad. Especially I think everyone here is very high level. It means the examiner knew that you are high level. Of course, I've worked with many students who are low level and they couldn't, it was very easy to push them to their limit. They were at their limit when they arrived. Luckily, that is not the case with any of you, to my knowledge. So these are going to be more like philosophical questions, questions about governance, society, economics, things like that. And the one thing here is if you try to personalize your answer, the examiner will steer you back to talking about generally. For example, this question, do people in your country generally have a good work-life balance? So you might say, well, I don't have a good work-life balance. I work all the time. And the examiner was like, yes, but how about generally speaking, people in your country? And they'll try to lead you in that direction because it's generally easier to talk about yourself or something specific, whereas talking about these general ideas is more challenging. So they're really trying to push you and see what the limit is for your speaking ability. So we've talking generally about the IELTS. Some of you may be working with students who are taking the IELTS, and this is a tricky thing. Something horrible I've seen is many students working towards IELTS who are not in any way ready for IELTS. And I think it just sets them up to be frustrated and hate English because the only thing they do with English is practice for a test, and that's not fun. So a couple things I can recommend is if you're doing IELTS, do IELTS skills. A lot of tutoring centers, they just do practice test, practice test, practice test, practice test. And if you're taking the IELTS, I recommend doing practice tests. I'll show you where you can find some. Actually, if you just Google IELTS practice tests, there's a million online. But the IELTS, as I said, is an excellent test that tests English proficiency. So anything that you're doing to increase proficiency. So if you're reading novels, if you're reading the internet, if you're talking with your friends, if you're writing blog posts or writing in your journal, long things, those are still practicing skills. And so it doesn't have to just be IELTS, IELTS, IELTS. If you have low learners, make sure to scaffold the tasks. And don't just give them a full-on IELTS. It's very intimidating and will be you might even have tiers. So you would definitely want to extend the time limit or have them just work on a small part of the test, maybe work with a partner or work in groups. You might even take an original test and change the language to make it easier so that students can build up confidence and ability. And then finally, the IELTS is not the goal in itself. Of course, people have different reasons for taking the IELTS, but you don't take the IELTS and then just stop with English. If you're taking IELTS for university, then you are actually going into the hardest part ever, because now you're really using the language for whatever, or for work or whatever. And so I think that's something that students lose sight of. They just think IELTS, 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 they get their score, and then they think, oh, I'm done. No, actually now the real work is just beginning, the real test of your skills. So those are some things to keep in mind. IELTS can be fun. There's all kinds of games to like practice your signal words or your vocabulary or grammar. So keeping that in mind. All right, so should you take the IELTS? You may be curious and want to test yourself, but the IELTS is expensive. And so I wouldn't take the IELTS unless you have a clear thing you want to do. You want to get a job that requires it, you want to go to a university that requires it, or you're immigrating in the country requires it, or you want to become an IELTS invigilator, then you would take it. You don't want to do it if you don't have enough time to prepare for it. So you wouldn't want to schedule a test for this coming Saturday. Or if you're working 80 hours a week, don't sign up for the test. Think about, if you don't get the score you want, can you afford to take it again? Oh, I'll show you, Joseph. It's very expensive. Logistically, how will you set yourself up? If you live somewhere outside of Nairobi, are you going to be able to stay in Nairobi? Because you shouldn't plan on, if you live 4 hours away, you shouldn't plan on taking a bus the morning of the IELTS. You'll be exhausted and you might be late. So you want to make sure you have somewhere to stay, and you'll also need to return for the speaking test. So make sure you think about those things and the cost of those things. And beware of fake tests. The British Council and IDP, which is out of Australia, are the only authorized legitimate tests. Any other test, maybe you can take it as a practice test, but make sure that you're not spending a lot of money. It is fake. If it is not British Council and it is not IDP, it is not a real IELTS test. There's no, and if they're saying, oh, one-time deal, take the test for half off. No, that's not a thing. They don't do that. The test is the test, the cost is the cost. They set it at specific times. If it sounds too good to be true, then it's too good to be true. Oh, the TOEFL and the GRE. Good question. Kari, let me see. Remind me to send me a message privately and we'll see if we can find that information. It's less, those are both less common and would be harder to find here in Kenya, whereas IELTS is everywhere. So if you wanted to take the test this weekend, there is an IELTS test in Nairobi, and you could see that this is the cost of the test. It's an expensive test. It costs that much each and every time. Oh, thank you, Khadijah. I'm sorry, we are running a little bit over. So you can see these are all in Nairobi. They do the tests in Mombasa and Kisumu, but rarely. They usually send people from Nairobi out to those places to do that. But if you are interested, this is the link here. So I'll put this PowerPoint into the chat after, so you can look and see the locations and the dates. If you have any special needs, for example, you're hearing impaired, you are sight impaired, you have dyslexia, anything like that, they make special accommodations for them as long as you have proof of your condition, but you will probably need to wait a little longer to schedule the test because they have very specific materials for special needs. These are two sites with practice tests. They're both good sites. They have all of the different components. And if you are planning on taking the test, certainly do practice. because it is a test of your proficiency, but it is also knowing the rules of the test. So you can have silly mistakes just by not following the rules. For example, putting too many words in the blank, something like this. And train yourself, right? Read any and everything. Don't just do IELTS listening, listen to movies, listen to podcasts. Don't just practice writing for IELTS. You want to have your writing fluency. So this means emails, journals, notes. And then for your speaking, practice your speaking. Just like a professional athlete doesn't just do the sport they do. A football player, soccer player doesn't just run around a field kicking a ball. A soccer player runs, a soccer player swims, a soccer player lifts weights. So in that way, you would want to do all of those things. Those of you who are asking about becoming an examiner, you might consider doing something like Invigilator or Marker first. But either way, if you go to British Council jobs, that's where they post now and again. Actually, a couple months ago, I was looking on the British Council website and they were looking, but of course, when I put this together, I looked on the same website and there was no mention of it. But if you go to the British Council or IDP website, you can also set yourself an alert so that if something comes up. No, Caroline, there's no language proficiency test to relocate to the US. I believe that if you want to become a citizen, once you're there and become naturalized, I think if it's clear that you have low English skills, they'll ask you to take a test. But I don't think anyone would ask you to. Your English is fabulous. But just to go there, like on a work visa or something like that, there's no test. The company, if you're going with a company, they may have their own requirements, but the US government does not, because they may not even give you an English test because there is no official language of the US. We all know that Americans speak English, but there is actually no official language. I'm going to let Austin speak, but just to let you know what's coming up, we're going to be looking at learner differences, age, learning style, multiple intelligences, interests, motivations, ability, and then working with differently abled students. So students who have disabilities. And I am looking for help with that because it's an area that I know almost nothing about, but I've been in touch with a few people on that. And then we'll also be talking about certificates coming in the future and how to get those. Oh, I don't know. I think the TOEFL is just a terrible test. It's very academic. Oh, I should also mention for work, there's also just a general IELTS test, which is a little bit easier. So that is the thing. TOEFL is only academic. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to Austin to share some closing remarks and information with us.
Okay, thank you, Mina, for the class. And I just hope I'm audible enough. There's some noise where I am, but I'll try to be audible as much as I can. So first of all, I want to say that for those who are joining for the first time, this is our third session. This is our third session, and we are doing the second period. We had the first period that was from March to August, beginning of August, and now we are in the second period. And it is great. We are learning a lot. And I just want to mention a few things. First of all, I'm very happy to see people coming as far as Kwale. You know, Kwale, that's Modesta. Then for the first time, I've seen here Madam Adala coming from Kilifi. Then I've seen Habakkuk coming from Mombasa. I've also seen Kereu coming from Makueni. And also there's a huge team here from Nairobi. But I also want to take exception to the EMCG. EMCG is one of the chapters of LPAC, the actual English Mastery Club group. And what they do is that they run a number of programs with the schools. So I just wanted to let the teachers be aware because of time, I'll not be able to give their coordinator time to talk. But I wanted to mention that those teachers who are interested and they have clubs and they want their students to be helped to improve their English, you can reach out as well. And then I can add you into the English Mastery Club. So already my details are shared out there on the chat. And then I also wanted to talk about LPAC, and I want to tell you guys, because you heard Mina kept referring to the group, shared in the group. So don't be locked out of the group. So share your details and then we can add you into the group, and then you can get to know more about what we do as LPAC, because this is just a tip of the iceberg of what we do. There are a lot of things that we do that has to help you out there. And then we didn't plan to have this session, but it was out of the chats that we have been having, the discussions and all that. And this came up and we said, why don't we jump into this and all that? So just reach out. I've shared my number there. And if you're not able to see my number, you can reach out to Mina and then I'll be able to get the details. And then finally, I just want to point out that even when you log into these sessions, people appreciate what you do. And I know we had a meet and greet event that was a month ago, or slightly more than a month ago. And we really appreciated the teachers and those who attended. And I just want to point out that I know a few of you here, I still have some packages and I have some parcels and also receipts for some of us who are already registered members of LPAC. So I'll be communicating with you guys. So no one should communicate with me regarding this, but I'll be communicating with you because I knew not everyone was able to come and all that. So I'll communicate with you and then we'll see how you can have your packages, parcels, and the receipts. But I thank you all. And we always have these sessions after every 2 weeks. After every 2 weeks, we have these sessions. So the rest of the information, I'll be able to share on the group. But if you have not been able to join the group, I've actually spoken for longer so that you can go into the chats and get my details there. So reach out to me. You can either send me a text or a WhatsApp message on that number there. Then I will be able to do the necessary. But I thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you again in a fortnight. And thank you, Mina, for the session. And Mina, I don't know what you are doing in Kisumu, because I'm not seeing people from Kisumu here. So maybe we might need to help you to work more from that end so that we see a lot of teachers from Kisumu also being here. But thank you very much for the session. So thank you all. And I'll take it back to Mina to conclude.
Thanks, Austin. You know what? You're right. We do need to get more Kisumu people here. So yes, I will work on that. Actually, I met some lady recently. I need to get in touch with her. Okay. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. I will share the PowerPoint and the recording to the chat. And if you're not on the chat, contact Austin. He's the administrator and he'll get you on board with us. I hope you all have a great night and thanks.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.